Without objection, members have 5 legislative days within which to submit written statements to be made part of the record. So ordered. As has been our tradition since I've been subcommittee chair, this military personnel mark was developed in a bipartisan manner and includes members' priorities focused on taking care of service members and their families. There were 320 amendments that were suggested by colleagues, and about half of them made the mark, and they were about equal in terms of Democratic and Republican amendments. This mark continues to build on our previous efforts to enhance the benefits our service members rightfully deserve. We have a series of subject-specific hearings that took place that informed many of the provisions that we've included in the mark. The bill supports a military basic pay raise of 4.6%, which may not be enough, and requires the Secretary of Defense to do a thorough assessment on military pay and compensation programs. As such, there is a provision to report on the accuracy of the housing allowance and exclude the housing allowance from household income for the purposes of the basic needs allowance. The scourge of suicide continues to plague the services. Based on our meetings with service members and families, we are taking action by increasing the number of behavioral health providers available. By addressing military and civilian behavioral health provider education pipelines, we will make a short and long-term impact on improving access to care for those who need it most. In addition, the mark includes provisions to provide additional financial support to service members stationed in Alaska, including Arctic pay and broadband and travel allowances to address the financial pressures and isolation that are contributing factors to death by suicide. The mark builds on last year's improvements to the Exceptional Family Member Program by establishing a grant program to better support families needing to navigate a new school district after every move and ensure that their children with learning or physical disabilities receive appropriate educational services for their needs. In 2021, more than 20,000 military families with immediate need for child care were stuck on wait lists. Throughout the year, we have visited child development centers across various installations and believe the department is not doing enough to recruit and retain an adequate workforce to support the child care needs of military families. In our most recent visit in San Diego, half the spaces of existing facilities were shuttered for lack of staff. As a result, we are requiring the Department of Defense to complete a study on adequate pay for military child care center employees. Last year, we made historic reforms to the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and this year we continue the work by asking GAO to ensure that our criminal litigators are getting the best training, resources, and experience possible. The subcommittee's oversight of the military health system is reinforced through various provisions in our subcommittee mark. We remain concerned about the increasing number of vacancies for funded military and civilian health care providers across the military health system. So, we are prohibiting the department from realigning or reducing military medical end strength until additional analysis on the impact is complete. We are also requesting an independent analysis of the quality and patient safety program and a GAO study on how TRICARE behavioral health coverage compares to mental health parity laws. Our service members and their families make considerable sacrifices for our nation. We must continue our commitment to help them and their families. Lastly, I want to acknowledge extraordinary committee support. The staff has done, once again, an outstanding job. So to Ilka Regino, our subcommittee director, to Dave Giacuti, to Giucchetti. Do I ever say it right, Dave? Hannah Kaufman, Glenn Deal, Forrest McConnell, and Sydney Fikes, we thank you for once again showing us what great talent can do. They have worked diligently and always in a bipartisan manner to develop this subcommittee mark. And with that, I now recognize Mr. Gallagher, the ranking member, for any comments he would like to make.
I thank the chairwoman not only for her remarks, but for over a decade of dedicated service to this subcommittee. Maybe we could just take a moment to thank you for all that you've done, and appreciate working with you. Thank you to the fellow members, mill people, as we're now calling them. I'm very excited about a lot of the provisions that are in the subcommittee mark, some of which were mentioned by the chairwoman. The mark includes vital provisions that support our warfighters, our military families, retirees, to give them the care and support they need, they deserve, and that they've earned. Specifically, this year's proposal continues to build the Space Force with an increase in end strength. However, the decreases in end strength for the active components of the Army, Marine Corps, Navy, and Air Force are concerning in light of the threats of an increasingly aggressive China, to say nothing of the barbarity on display from Russia in recent months. So we will continue to monitor these end strength reductions very closely to ensure we do not stretch the joint force too thin. This proposal also includes an extension of special pay and bonuses for service members that the chairwoman mentioned, particularly those in high demand fields. It supports a military basic pay raise by 4.6%, requires DoD to study the basic pay tables and basic allowance for housing in an effort to modernize and incentivize service member compensation, and facilitate the recruitment and retention of the most talented military in the world. Another important area of focus, as the chairwoman mentioned, is suicide prevention. We must do everything that we can to get after this issue and look at it holistically. This year's proposal continues to address the growing behavioral health demands across the military health system by looking at increasing the supply of behavioral health providers. It also supports chaplain-led resiliency and wellness programs. The mark also continues the committee's dedicated work in support of the military family. It encourages DoD, for example, to extend the autism care demonstration for an additional 5 years. It also authorizes financial reimbursement for moving expenses for spouses with home businesses. And another important issue we will be addressing is professional military education. And let me say, I particularly appreciate the chairwoman's willingness to engage with me on this issue. I think we found a lot of common ground. And I think our hearing was very valuable in terms of identifying potential paths forward for aggressive PME reform. We had a great briefing, a great hearing, and we'll continue to focus on certain issues such as the military-civilian consortium to research and make recommendations on PME. This would address challenges to PME in the era of great power competition, which will require some of our service members to know more about economics, new technology, supply chains, and other things like that. Finally, the proposed mark would continue to build on critical reforms in previous NDAAs and requires an assessment of headquarters staffing to the Office of Secretary of Defense, as well as the Office of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It also requires a report on the return on investment DoD receives from the Office of Cost Assessment and Program Evaluations, program assessment capabilities, and how those are measured. Basically, what we're trying to get at here is ensuring our tooth-to-tail ratio is where it needs to be. It also prohibits DoD and the services from removing military end strength until a full assessment of medical wartime requirements and emerging threats is completed. So, in conclusion, I just want to thank Chairwoman Spear again, thank all my colleagues for their hard work on this mark, and of course, I want to echo what the Chairwoman said about our incredibly dedicated staff, without whom none of this would be possible. Forrest McConnell, Glenn Deal, Ilka Regino, Dave. Admittedly, Dave, your last name is very hard to say, okay? Or it looks very intimidating. Dave Giacchetti, Hannah Kaufman, and Sidney Fikes. We appreciate your willingness not only to deal with all of our demands, but also work together in a bipartisan fashion in an effort to get a bill out of the committee and off the House floor and ultimately passed into law. So thank you, and with that, I yield my time.
I thank the ranking member. I hope you will continue to serve on this committee, because I think the depth of your knowledge and the leadership and certainly the work that we've done on advanced education for our military is something that really needs to continue. So I thank you for your cooperation and for your support. We will now proceed to the markup of H.R. 7900, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2023. Copies of our subcommittee mark and directive report language were made available and distributed to member offices on Monday, June 6th. Is there any discussion or question on the subcommittee mark? If there is no discussion, the chair lays before the members the text of the subcommittee mark for consideration. Are there any amendments to the subcommittee mark? Hearing none, the question now occurs on the adoption of the mark. So many as are in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. I believe the ayes have it, and the mark is adopted. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Escobar, for purposes of a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the subcommittee report the mark as amended favorably to the full committee.
The question is on the motion of the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Escobar. So many as are in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. A quorum being present, the ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I ask unanimous consent that staff be authorized to make necessary conforming technical and clerical changes and to remove from the mark provisions that would cause the mark to refer to other committees or would result in additional direct spending. Without objection, so ordered. There being no further legislative business before the subcommittee, this meeting is adjourned.